The shattering when the world tried to break me. They said I was too soft for survival, too tender to weather the weight of this world, that my quiet spirit would be crushed beneath concrete ceilings in the chaos of competition. But they never heard the storms I swallowed. They never saw the nights I wept into the pillow until the fabric held more salt than sleep. They never watched me unravel in the dark only to gather myself at dawn and walk out like nothing inside me was screaming. They didn't see the silent rituals, the way I clenched my teeth through grief, prayed in bathrooms, smiled at tables where my spirit was starving, and stayed soft in rooms that demanded steel. No, they didn't know, because I never let the shaking show. I was taught to be still even when shattered, to remain composed while the world pulled me apart. I became a master of composure, a quiet warrior in lipstick and grace. But inside, I was splitting open like an overripe sky. You see, I was not born from easy. No gentle lullaby birthed me. I was forged in fire, the kind that doesn't just burn, but brands. I came into a world already wounded, when it a lineage of quiet fighters, women who cooked through heartbreak, worked through weeping, and worshipped while wondering if anyone truly saw them. I was raised on resilience, but I also learned silence. Not the sacred kind that heals, the silencing kind. The kind that teaches you to hide your hurt so you don't make others uncomfortable. So I mastered the art of pretending. I smiled through severing, laughed while lonely, danced on days I was dying inside. I learned how to walk through fire without leaving footprints, but oh, how the soul tires when you perform peace while bleeding. I didn't know it then, but the breaking was sacred, the undoing was divine, because the God I serve never wastes a wound. He never lets pain pass without planting something in the soil it softens. Yes, there came a moment when the world tried to break me, when the betrayal came not from enemies but from those I trusted, when I reached for comfort and met absence, when the ones I loved most became the very ones who pierced me deepest and I fell hard. I collapsed into the kind of dark that doesn't come with light switches, the kind that makes you question everything, your worth, your purpose, your existence, your faith. I remember staring at the ceiling wondering if healing was even possible for someone like me, someone who had loved so loudly and been left so quietly. Mirror mocked me. The silence screamed, and every day I dragged myself through the motions, breathing but barely alive. But something wild and holy was stirring beneath the sorrow, because while the world thought they witnessed my breaking, heaven was orchestrating my becoming. Every fracture became an opening, every tear watered something eternal, and in my wreckage, I found revelation. The shattering is where the rising begins, because when you are broken to your bones, you begin to find what's real. You stop pretending, you stop performing, you stop asking for permission to feel. I learned to sit with my grief, to stop rushing my resurrection, to stop skipping over sorrow as if it had no holy purpose. I let the ache teach me, let the loss instruct me, let the disappointment drive me to divine dependence. That it was there, in that valley of nothingness, that I realized I had never been empty, just emptied of ego, of expectations, of illusions, of needing to be everything to everyone. And in that sacred emptiness, God began to fill me again, not with noise, not with people, but with presence, His presence. And I found something worth more than applause. I found peace, a quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself, the kind that remains even when everything else walks away. This is not the sound of defeat. This is the whisper of a woman gathering her pieces with purpose. This is the hush before the rise, the inhale before the roar, the sacred stretch between collapse and comeback. I learned that sometimes strength is not in holding it all together, but in finally falling apart. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop pretending you're fine and let God carry you into the unfamiliar corridors of becoming. So no, this breaking was not my end. It was my unveiling. My undoing became my awakening. Even in ashes, I inhale the holy. Even in wreckage, I write resurrection. Even with trembling hands, I sow seeds of tomorrow. Call it weakness if you must, but I call it sacred, because I found something sacred in the breaking. I found God in the spaces no one dared to enter, in the midnight questions, in the tear-stained prayers, in the silence that screamed of abandonment but actually sang of protection. They meant to destroy me, but the plot twisted in glory. What they thought was the end was actually the entrance into a more powerful me. I do not fear the fall anymore, because I have seen the fruit of being shattered and still standing. I've learned to bless the breaking, to kiss the scars, to thank the tears. Because somewhere in the middle of my worst season, I stopped begging to be saved and started rising to be seen. Seen by heaven, heard by myself, held by the hands that don't let go. I am not who I was before the breaking, and I never want to be, because this version of me, the one who limps with grace, who cries without shame, who stands without pretending, she is real, she is rising, she is wrapped in purpose, and though she has walked through the fire, she is not burnt, she is baptized. Not broken, but born again. So yes, the world tried to break me, but I serve a God who uses broken things to feed the multitudes, who builds altars from ashes, who calls the weary to rise. And here I am, proof that even in the shattering there is sacred survival. I don't just rise for applause. I rise because resurrection runs in my blood. Still, I rise. Not in spite of the shattering, but because of it. And this time, I rise slowly, intentionally, truthfully, with nothing to prove, just everything to reclaim. The silence where my soul learned to breathe. There was a hush before the healing, a deep, unfamiliar quiet that wrapped around my ribcage. Like morning's soft and steady hands. It was not the silence of peace at first, it was the silence of loss, of disappointment too large for language, of loneliness too raw to articulate. It came like a closing door, gently, but firmly. Suddenly I could hear everything, the echo of my own heartbeat, the trembling breath between sobs, the questions, with no answers, the aching space left behind when voices that once affirmed you vanished. This silence wasn't empty, it was full of everything I had avoided, everything I had silenced in myself, all the buried griefs, unspoken longings, forgotten prayers, uncried tears. I used to think silence was abandonment, that when the noise stopped, so did love, so did God, but in the quiet I met him differently, not in the thunder, not in the earthquake, but in the whisper, in the stillness between sighs, in the sacred rhythm of simply being. I met God between my breaths. He didn't come to fix me, not right away. He came to sit with me, to mourn with me, to hold me in the stillness until I could remember how to breathe again. There were no fireworks, no loud revelations, just presence. And somehow, that was enough. In the silence, I stopped performing, stopped explaining, stopped apologizing for being too sensitive, too soft, too slow in a world obsessed with speed. I stopped trying to outrun my own heart, and I started listening not just to the whispers of heaven, but to the woman inside me who had been drowning in noise for far too long. She was not loud, but she was alive. She had something to say, something sacred, something sorrowful, something strong. I learned that silence is not absence, it is invitation. An invitation to sit at the table with yourself, to pour a cup of grace and listen without judgment, to stop needing to be understood and start understanding your own soul. I sat with the silence like a sacred friend. No stage, no spotlight, no applause, just me, my breath, my tears, and the echo of heaven whispering, "You are not forgotten." Not in the stillness, not in the silence, not in the shadows, especially not there, because the silence wasn't punishment. It was protection. It was heaven placing holy hands over the chaos of my life and saying, "Be still. I am doing something deeper." They thought silence meant I had no fight left, but they missed it. They didn't see what was happening inside of me, while the world wondered where I went. Heaven knew I was healing in the hush. I was not giving up. I was growing in, learning how to roar without raising my voice, how to walk in authority without needing validation, how to become a sanctuary in a world addicted to sound. That silence became a womb, a holy place of gestation, of transformation, of sacred remembering. I remembered who I was when no one was watching. I remembered that my worth is not based on my performance, my productivity, or how many people applaud my pain. I remembered that I am enough, not because of what I produce, but because of who I am. A daughter, a temple, a poem written in breath and bone and the silence. It became my teacher. It taught me patience, taught me trust, taught me the difference between being alone and being aligned. It taught me to stop striving and start surrendering, to stop chasing healing and let it come to me like dawn, quiet, faithful, undeniable. In that stillness, I heard things I'd been too loud to notice before. I heard the rhythm of my heartbeat, not just the physical one, but the spiritual one, the pulse of divine timing that doesn't rush and cannot be rushed. I heard the unspoken language of my body asking to rest, of my spirit craving gentleness, of my heart begging to be known outside of usefulness, and I gave it all permission to exhale. I laid down every mask and met myself without filters. The silence became a sanctuary, a place where I could cry without interruption, laugh without explanation, and dream without limitation. I learned that stillness is strength, that retreat is not weakness, but wisdom, that withdrawing is not disappearing, it's deepening. And when I stopped fearing the quiet, it started singing back to me. It sang of mercy, of second chances, of how the most powerful revolutions begin in invisible spaces. It sang of women who rebuild altars in the privacy of their closets, whose prayers shake foundations even if no one hears them. It sang of me, of how I didn't need a mic to matter, didn't need a title to be anointed, didn't need permission to be whole, because the quiet had already crowned me, had already called me beloved, had already affirmed what the crowd could never confirm, that I am more than what I've lost, more than what I've endured, more than what I've been called. I am becoming, beautifully, silently, surely, and in that silence I heard it clear. You will rise, you will return, you will reclaim, but not in the way you used to, not with striving, not with force, but with stillness, with sacred steadiness, with the quiet confidence of someone who has survived the shattering and found gold in the gaps. This silence was not a sentence, it was a Sabbath, a divine pause, an act of holy preservation. Because God knew to carry what was coming, I needed to be emptied, I needed to hear myself again. I needed to trust that I could be silent and still, be seen, still be safe. Still be strong now, I know. The hush before the healing was the most honest space I've ever known, and I'll never fear it again, because in the quiet I remembered my name. Not the one the world gave me, but the one heaven whispered when it formed me from dust and breath. I am not forgotten. I am found. And in the silence I learned how to breathe again. The mirror facing the woman I had buried, I stood before the mirror, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, I didn't flinch. I didn't cover my face or force a smile to protect me from the truth. I just stood still, breathing, UNHIDDEN. And there she was, not the version I had curated for the world, but the woman I had quietly abandoned, the girl I buried beneath expectations, the soul I silenced to become palatable, agreeable, likable, survivable. She looked back at me not with shame, but with a quiet ache, eyes full of knowing, body marked by battles no one clapped for. She was bruised but burning, battered but breathing. She didn't need pity, she needed presence. She needed truth, she needed me, and I whispered, I'm sorry I left you in the dark. Not the physical dark, but the kind of shadow you send someone into when you deem them unworthy of the light. The kind of dark that exists when you start performing for love, smiling through exhaustion, clinging to identities that make you digestible, but slowly kill your spirit. I had abandoned her every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I laughed at jokes that wounded me. Every time I dimmed my light to let someone else feel taller. Every time I thought too much was an insult instead of a divine blueprint. She stood in that mirror, not polished or perfect, but profoundly human, and I let myself look, not glance, not inspect. See, I saw her heartbreak. Yes, but also her hope. I saw the lines on her face not as signs of aging, but as rivers of survival. I saw the softness in her body not as failure, but as a temple, a home that had held me through every storm. And slowly the judgment started to lift, the criticism softened, the shame loosened its grip, and I began to peel back the layers. The people-pleasing, the perfectionism, the polished smiles that masked my pain, the performance of being fine, gone. I peeled off the mask that said, I'm strong, when really I was drowning, the one that said, I've got it all together, when really I was unraveling at the seams, layer by layer. I shed the armor I thought I needed to be loved, and beneath it there she was, the real me, the unedited, unfiltered, unashamed me. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. She had cried all her fear into the ground. She had wept her worth back into her bones. She had bled her boundaries into being. She was fierce. Not because she had never been hurt, but because she survived it all, and still chose softness. She was flawed, but her flaws weren't failures, they were fingerprints of her humanity. Proof that she had lived, loved, lost, and learned she was free. Not because life had been kind, but because she finally stopped asking it to be. She decided to choose herself, to love the girl in the mirror as fiercely as she once loved others who never stayed, and I wept. Not because I was ashamed, but because I had finally come home to myself. Don't you see, this mirror didn't shame me. It didn't scold me for the times I betrayed myself to be accepted. It didn't scream about the mistakes I made when I didn't yet know who I was. It saved me. It reminded me of every version of myself I had left behind. The little girl who used to dance with abandon. The teenager who dreamed without ceilings. The young woman who loved without guardrails. They were all still in me. Buried, not broken. Waiting, not wasted. And the mirror, that sacred space, wanted them resurrection. I saw the weight I carried. The emotional bags I dragged from room to room. Disappointments never unpacked, grief never acknowledged, dreams deferred so long they forgot they had wings. But I didn't see a mess, I saw a mosaic. Every piece shattered was now shining in the light of recognition, because reclamation begins with recognition. You cannot heal what you won't first hold. You cannot reclaim what you won't name. So I stood there and said it out loud. You are worthy, even when no one claps, even when they leave, even when the metrics don't measure up, even when your voice shakes, even when your past tries to shame you. You are worthy. I said it again and again, until my own voice became medicine. Until my reflection began to smile, not because I forced her to, but because she believed me, you see. There is something holy about looking yourself in the eyes and saying, I choose you now. Not the better version, not the skinnier, shinier, cleaner version, but this one, right here, right now. The one who made it through hell with a heart that still beats and believes. I looked at her and saw every scar as a signature of survival, every wrinkle as a record of resilience. Every stretch mark as a sign that she had grown, even if it wasn't always in ways the world applauds. I had spent years trying to earn what I already carried, divine identity, sacred purpose, a name written in eternity. But that day in front of the mirror, I didn't need approval, I just needed to remember, and I did, that I am more than the labels they gave me, more than the seasons that broke me, more than the mirrors that once lied to me. I am becoming because I chose to come back, to return to the woman I left behind when I became too busy trying to survive, to return to the soul I once believed was too much, too messy, too sensitive, too scarred. She is not too much, she is finally enough. And as I stared into her eyes, the final veil lifted. I didn't just see the reflection, I saw the resurrection. You saw the story rising from the silence, the beauty breaking through the bruises, the fire flickering where the world thought they had snuffed me out. I saw a woman who would never again apologize for her softness, for her voice, for her truth, for her divine design. This was not just about self-love. This was about spiritual homecoming, about divine alignment, about honoring the vessel that had carried me through valleys the world never witnessed. And I knew then I would never betray her again. No more shrinking. No more sacrificing sacred peace for temporary approval. No more abandoning myself to feel needed. I made a vow to walk with her, to protect her, to believe in her when doubt starts whispering again, because reclamation is not a single moment. It is a rhythm, a practice, a daily return to what is true. And the truth is, I am not who I used to be. I am not the version they molded. I am not the echo of their expectations. I am the mirror made whole, the woman reborn from the pieces, the voice no longer afraid to speak, even if it trembles. And in loving the reflection, the fierce, flawed, free woman staring back at me, I reclaimed my resurrection. The oil in the wound where glory met my grief. There's something holy about the way wounds shine in the light. Not the kind of light that exposes to shame, but the kind that invites the sacred, the soft golden light of morning after morning, the healing hush that settles after the storm has screamed all it can. Wounds, when held by heaven, do not rot, they radiate, they glisten like altars where pain and promise collide, where the grief we thought would bury us becomes the very place God pours His glory. I didn't know it then, but the oil was already waiting in the wound. I didn't know the anointing I was praying for would be born in the very place I bled, that heaven would not send the oil from a distance, but would press it from the places I tried so hard to hide. No one told me that healing doesn't always come soft. Sometimes it comes through crushing, sometimes it flows after the breaking, sometimes it weeps out slowly from the places we begged God to take away. I thought I had lost everything, but what I lost was the illusion of control, the illusion of perfection, the illusion that strength means never feeling weak. What I gained was oil, divine oil, healing oil, the kind that doesn't just soothe, it sanctifies, the kind that doesn't erase the scar, it makes it shine, because heaven is strange like that. It doesn't waste a wound, it consecrates the cut. It says, this right here, this broken thing, this bleeding place, this ache that makes no sense, this will become the altar, this will become the anointing. And I heard Him whisper, not in the thunder, but in the trembling silence of my soul, this pain won't kill you, it will crown you. And something inside me shifted. I stopped trying to hide the wound and started holding it up like offering. I stopped pretending to be whole and let the cracks sing, because I finally saw it, the oil running down my scars like poetry in motion, like rivers of holy redemption, like heaven tracing its promise down the very lines of what once hurt the most. It was in the loss that I learned what lasts. It was in the grief that I found glory. The things I thought were setbacks, they were set-ups. The endings I mourned, they were midwives, delivering me into something not easier, but eternal. I learned to stop resenting the wound and started listening to it, because wounds speak, not in the voice of despair, but in the dialect of destiny. They say, you lived through this. You were not forsaken. You were still here. And survival is not just a story, it's a song. It's a song, a prophetic declaration that God is not done this pain. It's not random. It's not wasted. It's been marked, measured, multiplied. And though I didn't understand it, I no longer curse it, because I now know the oil was in the agony. The wisdom was in the weeping. The breakthrough was birthed through the breaking. Every tear I cried was a seed. And now I walk in a garden grown in sorrow but kissed by the sun of healing. This isn't just recovery, it's resurrection. I'm not just surviving, I am sacred. I carry the fragrance of oil pressed in private. I walk with a limp, yes, but it's a holy limp. The kind Jacob had after he wrestled with the angel and came out with a new name. Because that's what pain does when held in holy hands. It transforms your identity. It redefines your name. It rewrites your narrative. You are no longer the broken one. You are the beloved. You are the blessed. You are the burning bush that refuses to be consumed. And from that place, that sacred, scarred place, I rise, not polished, not perfect, but oily and undefeated. I am the result of every night I didn't give up, of every morning I got out of bed when it hurt to breathe, of every prayer I prayed when I didn't know if God was listening. I know now He was always listening. But more than that, He was weeping with me, whispering in the silence, pouring Himself into the cracks until the cracks began to glow. This is the divine exchange: for ashes, beauty; for mourning, joy; for despair, a garment of praise. He didn't just patch me up, He poured Himself into me. And now I carry a fragrance not even fire can erase. I walk different now. Not because I'm proud, but because I'm poured, because I'm filled with something this world cannot take. And when they ask how I kept going, how I didn't collapse under the weight, I won't say I was strong. I'll say I was anointed. Anointed not because I was fearless, but because I let Him meet me in the fear. Because I laid my grief on the altar and watched Him light it with glory. The wound did not win. It worshipped, it wept, it waited, until heaven turned it into a well. And now, I drink from that well daily. the well of remembrance, of revelation, of revival. And every time I forget who I am, I trace my fingers along the scar and remember this is where he came for me. This is where he covered me. This is where I rose, not in spite of the wound, but because of it. Because in this kingdom, the wounded don't lose, they lead. They don't bleed in vain, they birth movements. So if you see oil on me, understand, it came at a cost. It came through the wilderness, through the weeping, through the waiting, but I wouldn't trade it now. Because this oil is sacred. This oil speaks. This oil speaks, this oil sings of a God who anoints with ashes and heals through holes. So, let them talk. Let them wonder how I made it. Let them see the shine and never know the crushing, because what matters most is that I know. I know what it costs, I know who carried me. I know the oil is real, and from the very place they tried to destroy me, from the very place I once begged to escape, I rise oily, I rise holy, I rise whole, and I will never hide the shine. The rise, a holy rebellion. This rise was never meant to be polite. It was never designed to be quiet, timid, neat, or easily explained. No, this rise is not dainty, it is not delicate. It is not a whispered apology for surviving the storm. This rise is defiant. It is divine. It is the sound of a woman refusing to stay small, refusing to stay silent, refusing to shrink herself to fit the expectations of those who never had the courage to rise themselves. This is not just a comeback. This is a holy rebellion, a sacred revolt against every lie I was told, every label they placed on me, every ceiling they built over my dreams, every room where I was asked to leave parts of myself at the door just to be welcomed. I no longer walk in with apology. I walk in with authority. Because I know now, I was never buried, I was planted. They thought it was over. They mistook my silence for surrender, my retreat for defeat, my pause for perishing. But something was happening in the dark. Roots were growing. Faith was deepening. The strength was being forged in soil they could not see. And now I rise, not fragile but fortified, not just restored, reborn. I rise with my roots showing, unashamed of where I've come from. I don't erase the pain. I carry it like sacred evidence that the enemy failed. I rise with my scars glowing, not because I've healed perfectly, but because I've made peace with every place I've bled. These scars are not signs of weakness. They are sacred tattoos of survival. Each one tells a story of what tried to take me out, and what God used to bring me through. I carry a strength now so ancient, so undeniable, even the stars seem to pause to watch me walk. Because I don't walk alone. I walk with a lineage of warriors behind me. I walk with angels beside me. I walk with fire in my bones and freedom in my lungs. I owe no explanations. I owe alignment, obedience, wholeness, peace. I owe it to the voice inside me, the one that thundered when I was breaking, the one that whispered when I was wandering. You were never buried, only planted. And planted things don't die. They rise. So I rise loud with purpose, with prophecy, with power. I rise with joy that doesn't depend on circumstances, peace that passes understanding, the vision that can't be dimmed by doubt. And no, I don't apologize for the light. I spent too many years trying to dim myself down so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable, trying to fit into boxes that were never mine to begin with, trying to be acceptable instead of anointed. But now I radiate, I blaze. I shine unapologetically because I know who I am. Let the darkness whisper, let the critics murmur, let the doubt scream. I no longer tremble at the noise of the enemy, because I know who walks beside me now, and his name carries weight, his voice carries thunder. His breath created galaxies and it breathed life into me. I am not here by accident. I am not here to take up less space. I am not here to survive. I am here to reign, to walk in dominion, to take back territory, to recover every piece of me that was lost in the battle. Every time they counted me out, I counted it as confirmation. Confirmation that my crown was still being carved, that my story was still being written. This crown was not inherited, it was fought for. It was forged in silence, in sorrow, in sacred stillness. This crown was built in the midnight wrestles, in the weeping that turned to warfare, in the ashes of everything I once thought I needed. I wear it not with arrogance but with awareness. I know what it cost. I know what it broke. I know what it rebuilt. This rise is not cute. It's not marketable. It's not easy to digest. It is radical. It is righteous. It is restorative. And it is mine. I rise not just for me but for every woman who hasn't yet found the strength to stand. For every girl who was told to sit down and be quiet. For every daughter who was taught to disappear in order to be loved. I rise for her. I rise for us. I rise because when one of us rises, we all do. I rise like morning, like mercy, like prophecy fulfilled. And I rise again, even when I fall. Because this rising isn't a moment, it's a movement, a rhythm, a resurrection. It's not about having it all together. It's about coming back every time life knocks you sideways and choosing to believe that the best wine still flows from the cracked vessels. Don't rise perfectly, I rise faithfully. I rise fiercely. I rise full of holy fire, the kind that cannot be extinguished by rejection, delay, betrayal, or silence. I rise with forgiveness in one hand and fire in the other. I rise with grace in my mouth and grit in my bones. I rise not waiting for someone to give me permission, but walking like I've already been sent. And I have sent to restore, sent to reclaim, sent to rebuild the ruins with beauty and boldness, because I carry heaven's yes, because I carry God's breath, because I carry the legacy of every woman who decided not to die in her wilderness. This is not a comeback. This is a holy uprising, an uprising of the woman who once felt invisible, who once swallowed her voice to make others comfortable, who once bowed her head when she was born to lift it high. Now she returns with wind in her lungs, with glory in her steps, with heaven backing her every word. She is no longer afraid. She is no longer hiding. She walks in full view of those who counted her out and still chooses love over vengeance, still chooses grace over bitterness, still chooses joy over fear. That, my friend, is power. That is rebellion. That is resurrection. So let the world say what it will. Let the fire come. Let the waves rise. I've been through worse and I'm still standing. Better yet, I'm still rising. And this time, I won't rise quietly. I won't rise apologetically. I won't rise half-heartedly. I will rise as all of me, every scar, every story, every sacred thread of survival woven into a crown. Because this rising is not revenge, it's reclamation, it's restoration. It's to remembrance that I was always royal, even when I was wrapped in rags. So hear me clearly, StillIRise. And this time, I'm not coming back. I'm coming home to the throne that waited for me the whole time. The legacy. I am the echo of every woman who didn't give up. I stand here now on the shoulders of giants. Not the ones with accolades, but the ones who carried brokenness and still kept walking, who whispered prayers in the night even when morning never came, who planted seeds of hope in soil soaked with tears. I am the echo of my ancestors, their unfinished prayers becoming my harvest, their soft songs rising in my chest like new life breathing through ancient veins. I feel them in the hollow of my collarbone, in the echo of my voice, in the steady rhythm of my bones. Every step I take resounds in the halls of those who refused to vanish beneath the weight of generations. We carry stories that time tried to bury. With each breath, we breathe them back to life. We are walking archives where grief and glory coexist, memory and miracles entangled. I am the unfinished prayer of my mother's mother, the one who sang lullabies in broken languages, who carried me in her womb long before I ever took breath. She sang over me with prayers still rising like incense into empty skies, prayers anchored in desperation but laden with unshakable faith. When she said amen, something shifted in the spiritual world. A generation stepped into promise. I am the rhythm of every woman who refused to stay silent, who held her tongue like a weapon against abuse, who let the scripture of her own suffering be read aloud by heaven's pen. Their joy-laced tears and funeral-clad laughter beat in sync with the blood in my veins. Their survival is my inheritance. Their courage carries my name. I rise so that when I move, they move with me, and every time I rise they rise again. Our ascension is collective. It is not marked only in solo triumph, but in the symphony of souls finding themselves in the same moment. This is bigger than me. This is bloodline reclamation, not an individual awakening, but a generational tide washing over every coastline where despair once dwelled. This is healing passed down like prophecy, spoken in secret tongues in kitchens, closets, behind closed doors when no one was listening but God himself. We are living miracles walking in promises passed like sacred heirlooms, from silent hands to trembling mouths to roaring songs of praise. I rise for the girls who still don't know their gold, who look in the mirror and see broken promises instead of unbreakable truths, who feel small in spaces that weren't made to hold them. I rise for the women learning to love the sound of their own breath, who discovered they could whisper prayers into the empty spaces and they echoed back as answered songs. I rise for the broken ones still rebuilding altars from their ache, every shattered tile, every charred ember becoming bricks in a new foundation. I rise so they'll know you can be both soft and unshakable, not despite your tenderness, but because of it. Softness is not liability, it is your superpower. It allows you to hear heaven's heartbeat even when the earth trembles. You can cry and still be chosen. Crying is not disapproval. It is a sacrament in the temple of your soul. It washes out what the lie of shame buried in the hidden hallways of your heart. You can lose everything and still reclaim your fire. Loss was the coal, but persist that I did, and glory will kindle the flame. My rise is not just mine. It is a legacy. It is a lineage. It is a living, breathing hallelujah singing through 500 years of unremembered saints and unnamed victors. It is a testament, even in silence. Our story speaks volumes. Even in scarcity, we are abundant. Even in ashes, we still smell like heaven. I rise, not for the spotlight, but so the next in line won't choke on her own invisibility. I rise so she won't have to gather crumbs from tables that say not for you. I rise so she know her voice was never meant to fit into partitions of approval. I rise so she meets herself before she dies and recognize divinity in her reflection. With every step, every whisper, every word, I become proof. Proof that silent prayers count, that courage is not loud but relentless, that redemption might cost tears, but it pays in generational deliverance. I become proof that forgiveness is not forgetting, it is forging a sword from the chains that once bound us. I become proof that the cracks in our souls are not imperfections, but conduits through which grace flows. I become proof that love soft as moss, strong as oak, can outlast trauma, pain, and even death. And so I stand, knowing heaven is watching. Every star is an ancestor clapping silent hallelujahs across the span of years that birthed me. And earth is breathing because I speak life over my scars. I speak favor into closed doors. I speak resurrection over deflated dreams. I speak lineage over loneliness. I speak revival over renunciation. Some will see me, some won't. I accept both. Because vision is not always visible. Legacy is not always loud. Work done in hidden places echoes in heaven's halls long before it registers on earthly screens. I walk like I've come to fulfill a promise written in eternity before my mother was born. I walk like I don't need proof, but I still provide it. By living what they said couldn't, I walk like I'm not chasing recognition. I am returning to my reflection and saying, I am here. And it is enough, for it is more than enough. Because resurrected stories carry resurrecting power. Generations before us died that we might live, came undone so we could be undone no more. Faced nightmares so we would dream unchained. They raised their hands to an invisible God with hope in their hearts not yet shown on earth. We are the fruit of faith too bold to die. We are the living legacy of women who whispered low, but prayed loud. We are the echo of every woman who didn't give up. And so now, in this moment, I let every prayer that came before flow through me to the ones who come after. May they stand on our shoulders and reach further than we ever dared. May they carry less fear and more knowing. May they hold hands across time, blood, geography, culture, and declare, we rise together, we heal together, we fulfill the story that began long before us. I raise my voice to honor what was, to testify what is, to summon what will be. Still I rise. And in that rising every ancestor feels the earth tremble with new beginnings.